crafty friends, this is Emily Leiphart here for Tailored Expressions, and in today's video I'm sharing 4 cards using the With All My Art card making kit. If you love paint splotches and paint swooshes in your card designs, you'll be excited about all this kit has to offer. I've loved and collected these types of stamp sets ever since I started card making, so I was thrilled to see the variety of stamps and stencils in this kit. Let me show you what's included in the kit as well as all the add-ons. First, we have the 4-part layering Paint the Town dies. There are 2 sizes of paintbrushes and they are the cutest ever. The layers allow you to die cut the base with handle, the bristles, metal piece that holds the bristles to the handle, and of course the paint. The 9 different splotches and swooshes in the Splash of Color stamp set fit both the paintbrush sizes, so you can pair them up to look as if the brushes are actually painting the image. There's such a cute variety of styles, and you can feature both ends, which will make your cards, or little works of art, even more interesting. You'll see how cute this looks later in my video. You can't have a kit without sentiments, and here's the fabulous With All My Art stamp set. There are 4 large sentiments with a mix of scripted fonts, as well as 5 secondary sentiments which can be used on their own as one-line sentiments. These pair well with the bigger sentiments and the coordinating dies, which are an add-on. I love how they cut out the sentiments very close to the letters so it doesn't hide any of the background. Next up is the Bold Brushstrokes layering stencil, which includes 2 stencils. You can use them as they were meant to be to create a full background, or you can use them on their own freehand as I have in my samples. Also included is the Insiders With All My Art panels. There are 2 each of 6 designs, and these fit perfectly on the inside of your A2 cards. As I've shown in past videos, you can also use these on the outside of your cards. My color palette for this video includes rosewater, watermelon, mint julep, and cilantro. I'll be using both the inks and some of the coordinating cardstock, as well as basics such as sugar cube, buttercream, toffee, and black licorice. You'll also see the adorable shaped envelope seals, which you'll be able to purchase as an add-on. I'm sure you'll agree with me that these are the best envelope seals yet. I'm starting by die cutting all the pieces from the Paint the Town dies to make a bunch of paintbrushes in both sizes so they're ready to be placed on cards at any time. Assembly is so easy, especially with the fine nozzle on the Barely Art liquid glue. I cut the bases from toffee cardstock and then I layer the bristles, which were cut from buttercream frosting. Shockingly, this is my first time using this color, and soon you'll be seeing more of it. I thought this color closely resembled natural brushes while still being neutral. There are little notches at the bottom of the bristles, which makes it easy to line up. The metal section can be placed right above the bristles, but since it covers up most of the wooden handle, I decided to place it a little bit lower, right above the die cut lines which represent the individual bristles. This also gives the brush a whole different look than if you were to place the entire metal section directly above the end of the bristle die cut. There's no right or wrong way to do it, it's just personal preference. I recommend trying both and see which you prefer. I had so much fun assembling these little paintbrushes and could assemble them for days. This is something that would be fun to do if you're lacking mojo or if you just want to relax and wind down after a long day. Let's get started on my cards. I'm going to use the Splash of Color stamp set to create 2 different A2 backgrounds. If you love abstract backgrounds, think of this as another way to use these shapes and patterns. If you love using paint strokes in their traditional way, then you can go to town with this set and add the paintbrushes. I'm going to keep it simple with this first design by stamping 5 different patterns off the edges at 2 opposite corners. I stamped the first one with rosewater, then watermelon, mint julep, and cilantro. I moved these stamps each time, but I also could have just flipped the panel, keeping each stamp in place. After the colors are stamped, I use watermark ink to stamp the splotch 3 times and use silver embossing powder to add shine to this design. For my second design, I'm going to use a more freestyle graffiti approach and stamp the swooshes more randomly. I'm also going to stamp 2 at a time and flip the panel to speed up the process. I did mess this up initially when I got to the second mint julep stage and accidentally used watermelon again. So I had to start over, but I've cut out that part and replaced the panel, then re-stamped up to that point. Next, I'm going to use the Abstract Pattern stamp set to add some black details to this design. This stamp set was part of the original Abstract kit but is now available separately. I used VersaFine Clear Nocturne ink for a super bold black, and I'll set aside this finished panel and move to the next card. My next 2 cards will be in the mini slim proportions. While planning for my third design, I placed the stencil and test out which paintbrush size works for the stenciled swatches, and it's the smaller brush. Now I know how much space I need to leave and how much overlap the swatches can have to ensure that the paintbrushes will fit. I use a bitty blender brush with rosewire ink, and it's so cute as I test it with the coordinating paintbrush. The ink looks darker here, but once it dries completely, it'll match perfectly. Next, I'll move the stencil and use a different swoosh for mint julep. For the remaining colors, I use coordinating pastel and single color blender brushes. After I use all 4 of my palette colors, I leave the middle section open, and that's where I'll place the sentiment. For what was planned as my 4th and final design, I ruined the panel because I blended off the edge of the panel, so next time I'll be sure to place a piece of scrap paper underneath the edge to protect the middle section of my panel. I love the way this turned out, so I'll definitely have to recreate it. At this point, I thought I would just end at 3 cards, so I move on to stamp the sentiments. I stamped the first set with VersaFine Clear Nocturne ink on Sugar Cube cardstock, and the second set I stamped with Sugar Cube ink and heat embossed with white embossing powder on black licorice cardstock. I knew that I was most likely going to use all white on black sentiments since the card bases were all white with lots of color, and the black sentiments would pop the most. Next, I use the coordinating with all my art dies to cut out the big sentiments, and the sentiment strips dies to cut out the smaller sentiments. I finally got my hands on the sentiment strips dies, and I can't believe I didn't have them until now. They work really well with all of the Tailored Expressions one-line sentiments. After assigning sentiments to my cards, I'm ready to assemble them, but I'm also going to use basic standalone dies to add a few more details to these panels. I wanted to make sure that silver was represented on all of the cards, so I cut a shadow layer from silver foil cardstock, which I'll glue to the back of the second sentiment. For the first card, I used the A2 thin frame cutting plate to cut both silver foil and black licorice cardstock, placing one of each around the design. While I decide on how to finish the second card, I decide to use the stitched mini slim stacklets to cut out the center of the third card. I'll pop up this portion slightly for visual interest. Now I can start assembling my cards. I use a tape runner to attach the stamped panel to a sugar cube base, then I use liquid glue to attach the two frames. I wanted to pop up the sentiment with foam tape, but since the top part is too narrow to accommodate even the foam strips, I cut 3 extra layers and stack them together 4 high. Then I glue the entire unit onto the card, and that finishes my first card. For my second card, I attach the sentiment to its silver foil shadow and leave it to dry. I chose a mint julep card base and used the A2 layer stacklets to trim down the panel. Then I had a really hard time deciding if I should just leave the panel as is or add even more detail using the raised Pearson cut plate. Obviously, I chose to use the raise. I added foam tape to the back of the sentiment, and that finishes my second card. Moving on to my third design, I've glued the outside frame piece to the card base and left the center panel sitting on top for now. Now I'm going to use foam tape and pop on the paintbrushes and black foam strips to pop up the sentiment. I wanted to add more black details to balance out all the white, and I do this in the form of a scallop strip, which I've cut from the middle size of the petite scallop mini slim stacklets. I play around with the two sides and choose the left side slightly more to the top of the card and glue that in place. I was originally going to pop up the entire panel on foam tape as well, but since it already has a lot of dimension, I'm going to die cut a second panel and simply glue them in place. At this point, I couldn't stop thinking about the other mini slim design I botched, so I wanted to do something a bit more bold and decided to place the paintbrushes on a black licorice panel with the remaining big sentiment. As you can see, I wrestled with the possibilities for sentiment placement, but stuck to my original plans. For the card base itself, I wanted to balance out the fact that there were 2 rosewater brushes and 2 watermelon brushes, but only 1 each of mint julep and cilantro. I cut 2 3.5 inch by 6 inch panels from mint julep and cilantro cardstock. Then I used my guillotine trimmer to cut them both diagonally in half, taping 1 each of the 2 halves together. After attaching that panel to the card base, I attached the black panel to the card, the paintbrushes with glue dots to give them a slight dimension, and popped up the sentiment with foam tape. Here's a review of all 4 cards using the With All My Art card making kit. I obviously got a little carried away, but the possibilities are truly endless with these products. They work so well for A2 and mini slim card sizes, but they'd work equally well for square cards, tags, and business slimline as well. It would be impossible for me to choose a favorite, as I liked the next card more than the previous. Still, I'd love to know which card is your favorite, and I look forward to seeing what you make with this kit. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe for more inspiration. You can find all of these products in the Tailored Expressions web store at tailoredexpressions.com. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon.